And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and as always on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio. This is the week that was, or in a lot of cases wasn't. Clearly, if you are a liberty-minded individual, you believe in freedom, you believe in individual rights, you believe in the rights of everyone to maintain and pursue a life of their own self-determination, this was a difficult election. On one hand, nationalists at the Nationalist Party held their own in the United States Senate. Whether or not they make gains or not seems to be up for dispute right now, given the closeness of certain elections and the discovery, if you will, of ballots and, God forbid, hanging chads somewhere in the wilds of Florida. In the House, well, does it really matter? The duopoly, continues to play rock'em sock'em robot with each other until whoever that individual cycles, head gets blocked off or knocked off or whatever, and we have more of the same. We can look forward to 2 years of sunny, high-temperature gridlock with Republican on Republican crime, Republican on Democrat crime, and, well, here in Rhode Island, apparently Democrat on Democrat crime, with no resolution of major issues, no real philosophical spirituality, if you will, in government and how they involve the ordinary citizen. Nope. The weather forecast has come in, and it's going to be a couple more years of more of the same. We've got shall we say, a rain-abbreviated show tonight. We've got a couple hours of programming coming up. In the spirit of the post-election period and going into the holidays, this week we'll start to have some spectacular local food vendors on. I'm going to tease you with that throughout the show. Over the next coming weeks, some you'll recognize, some that are new to us. And today, joining us is someone very new that we met, ironically, out on the campaign trail over at Hope in Maine, over in the East Bay. But joining live on the line is my good friend, Chris Thrasher. If you haven't listened to the show before or you don't know our history, Chris and I met on the battlefield known as the 2016 Libertarian National Convention, where we both were whipping votes for one William Weld to be the vice presidential nominee for said Libertarian Party. There's an awful lot of irony in there, and there's an awful lot of history. But after riding to victory, if you will, helping, in my case, in a small way, in Chris's case, in a major way, secure the Libertarian Party national nomination for Mr. Weld, the next stop on the train, if you will, for Chris was he took over the ballot access drive for the Gary Johnson Bill Weld campaign in 2016. It was a spectacular success. The Libertarian Party became the first third party in a generation to be on the ballot in every single state, every single territory, every single planet, if you will, in these United States. And it was largely up to the ferocity with which this gentleman approached the project in general. My own memories, of course, of fun-filled, warm summer afternoons, driving across the highways and byways, ending up at a town hall somewhere out in Chepachet or somewhere out that way, only to find out that they weren't open on Fridays. Yet we could leave the petition ballots in a box next to the door. That's democracy at work for you, folks. Yikes. But Chris was ultimately successful, even in Rhode Island, the bluest of blue states. No pressure, Rhode Island is the last to start its presidential nomination process and the last to finish. So literally, the entire libertarian universe, if you will, fate, for those few days, wrote on our guest, Chris Thrasher. You guys, I know him very well over the last couple of years. He was a guest speaker at the Liberty Forum just a few short weeks ago here in Rhode Island. And he's been a regular supporter of libertarian efforts throughout this country. And it's my privilege, for the first time, to welcome him to the coalition. Chris, thanks for coming on board.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ford. I must say it's a joy and a pleasure to join you here today. I do have fond memories of the ballot access drive in 2016. Rhode Island, as you mentioned, was the very last stop, number 50 out of 50 for state ballots. And yes, I had no notion of how big the state of Rhode Island can appear when you're zipping from town to town over the course of a week to deliver petitions. Never thought I'd be able to put a couple thousand miles on my car by spending a week in Rhode Island, but it was done. Anyway, so it is a pleasure to be on the show, and thanks for having me, Pat.
Now, I'm sharing this out throughout the libertarian planet right now. We just didn't get together tonight to say hello and reacquaint ourselves after being apart for seemingly months, but it was just a few weeks ago. But, clearly there was an election this week, and we wanted to take a look really at the libertarian strategy, the results, the impact, the effects, and the challenges that America's largest third party faces. And I guess, first of all, I mean, if you could, how would you sum up the evening?
Well, let's start with the successes, or in this case, the success. And that would be to neighbor to the north in New York. Now, historically, the Libertarian Party has had to spend more than $200,000, sometimes as much as $300,000, on acquiring ballot access for candidates to run on the Libertarian Party line in the state of New York. Well, this time in 2020, we will not have to, because gubernatorial candidate Larry Sharp did indeed cross the 50,000 vote threshold in order to achieve a ballot line for the Libertarian Party. So that saves us a tremendous amount of money. There's no question that campaign did a very good job as far as that goes. Now, after raising about $450,000 or more for that campaign, the cost per vote comes to somewhere around $5, as they got about 90,800 votes for that campaign. So there's still a little bit of work to be done there. But the good news is that ballot access has been secured in New York for 2020 for the Libertarian Party. Now, you will notice that I said success as opposed to successes, because unfortunately there's no way to spin this. This was not a good year for the Libertarian Party across the country. There were several fine candidates and several fine campaigns, some coming painfully close. But in the end, unfortunately, that is the achieving ballot access in New York is the sum total of what we've gotten for the efforts. Now, I will say this right quick. Before we launch into all sorts of, what ifs and coulda, shoulda, wouldas and whatnot, let's say this. The fact that we're actually having this conversation, saying that coming painfully close, and I mean in some cases less than 0.5% even close in elections. The fact that we're having this conversation and saying that is not acceptable, that nothing more than a win is acceptable, that in and of itself is a bit of a success, because it was not too many years ago when the Libertarian Party could not even dream of sniffing at winning a state representative race in any state, let alone such states as Wyoming, where we had a fantastic candidate, Bethany Baldus, in Wyoming District 55, lost by tens of votes. I did not say tens of thousands or tens of votes, something like 53 votes separating the Libertarian Party from having a state representative in the state of Wyoming, who she came painfully close to defeating the would-be Republican majority leader. So again, there is proof libertarians can be competitive. Unfortunately, we just didn't get over the mark.
Right.
So I say again, the fact that we're having the conversation about anything less than a win being not acceptable, that in and of itself is an improvement over the years, but we're just not there yet, Pat.
Which brings into the bigger question. Now, there were multiple, marquee races, and let's go through a few. Gary Johnson in New Mexico was the great national hope. And this is the continuing source of frustration. Our external polling, not internal polling, but external polling throughout the race ultimately puts Gary in contention in his effectively what's become known as his home state, and the state that he had served successfully, actually an astonishingly successful 2 double terms as governor, which really, that experience in New Mexico set the tone really for his entire presidential efforts. What happened? What do you think? Is it a question of, quote unquote, as we get closer to election day, people go home to their parties? You know, they're rooting ultimately for Laundrie, not the candidate? Or is that just being bitter and cynical?
Well, I'll tell you what. I do have some firsthand on-the-ground experience in New Mexico. I spent a lot of time there, especially this year. And I will tell you right now, you really have to lay the blame at the feet of that campaign. I just cannot say that campaign was run well. I think that waiting to the last minute, and in fact waiting to jump in the race, and actually waiting beyond the time that the media was enthralled with Johnson speculating to enter the race, there was basically a bump in media coverage. Oh yes, is he going to run? Yes, great. But then the decision inexplicably was made to keep the announcement from happening for another 2 or 3 weeks, as I recall. So by the time the official announcement was made, all of that built-up media hype pretty much had dissipated. Now, on the ground, there are some fantastic activists that participated in that campaign, don't get me wrong. But it seemed as if the plan to run that campaign, too often, sometimes I think libertarian candidates think they're running Republican races in the 1990s. And that's not going to be successful in this day and age. It's not going to be successful in a state like New Mexico. So, I don't think that there's any question that Gary remains a popular figure. Something I'd like to talk about going forward in this conversation down the road here a little bit once we get past the actual dissection of the election is the concept of such things as instant runoff or even ranked choice voting. Mm-hmm. If ranked choice voting had been in effect in New Mexico, I think we'd be talking about Senator Gary Johnson, because there's no question that he would be most people's, if not their first choice, their second choice. Mm-hmm. So that's another conversation for later on in the day. But yeah, I think that we have to look at how our campaigns are run, and the fact that Johnson's campaign really petered out at the end. Polls hurt. Polls. Not now. I will say there was one particular poll that completely messed up the methodology, and it didn't even mention Gary's name when they were polling. So yeah, that's a huge faux pas there on their end. And yes, that did hurt the campaign without it being their fault. But I've got to tell you, it just seemed like there was not enough on the ground there, and in the end, it only resulted in about 15% or so for Mr. Johnson.
Which, by the way, again, reflecting on your earlier remarks, the notion that a libertarian candidate would get 15% in a race for a United States Senate opening
We've come a long way. A long way. There's no question.
Right. And yet the thirst and the hunger stands for us to break through that gas barrier. Talk to folks, if you will. You mentioned timing. And inherent in that is taking advantage of the media news cycle. Explain that to folks who may not have actually worked in a campaign before, and how important that is.
There is nothing more important in any campaign, whether it's for dog catcher or president of the United States. Momentum is what wins elections. And when you have a situation where the media is clamoring for something to happen, because before Mr. Johnson jumped into the race in New Mexico as a perfect example, there was not a question about who was going to win. Martin Heinrich in the New Mexico, yes, it did elect Gary Johnson for 2 terms as governor, but we have to understand New Mexico is one of the bluest of the blue states at this point. Right. And that wasn't always the case, but it's certainly the case now. Heinrich had been polling, the few polls that were even bothered the few polling companies that even bothered to take a poll before Johnson's entry, Heinrich was running away more than 60-70%. against a candidate, Mick Rich, on the Republican side, who was a businessman for sure, but nothing a good businessman, but no previous electoral experience, and I think a perfect example of a case where the party, knowing that it's going to lose an election, is trying to find someone just to run. So the media was absolutely enthralled with the concept, with the very idea that, hey, this might all of a sudden turn into a competitive race. And instead of capitalizing on the news cycle, that campaign chose to wait to make the official announcement. By the time the announcement was made, it was being considered as almost a foregone conclusion, so the announcement itself was barely covered. Now, again, momentum is what wins elections. And anything that we can do on the libertarian side of things, anything that we can do to generate media coverage, or when media coverage is gifted to us, we must do everything in our power to keep the attention on and to take advantage of it when it is presented. So, the worst thing for a candidate is not being talked about. And if the candidate is being talked about in the media, that means the candidate's going to be talked about at the water cooler. That means the candidate's going to be talked about in sitting down at the kitchen table. So it is imperative that we latch on to every possible drip of media coverage that we get, and we act at the appropriate times when it comes to campaigns. Right. I'll tell you this, Pat. I don't want to focus just on that particular campaign, because I think, we had a lot of campaigns across the country that really did everything right. Right.
But I just wanted, if I could just jump in for a second, the final lesson in that is, what is the beauty of earned media? It's free. Not only does it ship momentum, but in a third party, which is always fighting for the type for a fraction of the resources that are accorded, both by government and by large vested corporate donors to the duopoly, it is critical, whether you're running for town council or, in this case, the United States Senate, that you be sensitive. You have what I call that media spidey sense to any opportunity that you can get your name out there for free. And it also, because it's not a commercial, news reports convey a sense of legitimacy that you can't get even if you've got money to buy, big media commercials. So that's why I wanted to kind of focus on that, because the centerpiece of Rhode Island and some of the more insurgent states is trying to maximize our ability to be involved in the news cycle. And that's a critical point. Now, as you point out, there's a lot of examples of things done right. Give us a few.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go right back to Wyoming. In the end, I'm looking at the stats right now. The Libertarian candidate in that race actually lost by 53 votes. That's painful. And here's the thing: this district, was almost something like 30 points to the plus as far as being a Republican district. That campaign had an astute consultant on the ground. It had a base of volunteers and paid activists going door to door. They knocked on every door in that district twice, I think 3 times actually. The messaging was focused on the issues that matter to Wyoming. Wyomingians, I guess is the appropriate term, which, let's be frank, the issues that matter to somebody in Riverton, Wyoming are going to be different to the issues that matter to somebody in Providence, Rhode Island.
Right.
That is what we have to understand as libertarians in order to effectively communicate and to effectively campaign. That's where we need to have our focus. We need to know our audience. I'm not saying, we're not getting into this argument, we need to always talk about libertarian principles and nothing else. Okay, yes, I absolutely agree that we must stay true to our libertarian principles. However, if we are not trying to have a conversation with voters that whom we are trying to convince to vote for us, if we are not willing to talk about the issues that matter at that kitchen table in Riverton, Wyoming, and instead we wish to talk about taxation is theft ad nauseum, that's where we're not going to have any success. This campaign had great messaging, it had great effort, and it still came up painfully shy of a victory.
Right.
But I will tell you, the model that this campaign used. This is what we need to do going forward. We need to focus on winnable districts. This was a district with a small win number. We also need to focus on, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but I do want to talk about where the Libertarian Party can advocate for changes in laws, can advocate for changes to ensure voter integrity. Because I'll tell you what, there may well have been a little shenanigans in this particular race because the Libertarian candidate, in fact, was leading until absentee ballots were counted.
Right.
Always interesting little tidbit there, but we can get into that a little later.
Well, and what's key here about this campaign is that it was a professional campaign. To follow up on your point, it's the ability to use libertarian values and to speak to local issues, in a sense, refract local issues through the prism of libertarian values, that is critical. You don't have to, you nailed it. You don't have to give up, you don't have to go centrist, you don't have to go statist, you don't have to, you really don't need to give up on your philosophy to be successful in local elections. You just simply need to find a way to tug at the issue strings, if you will, heartstrings of local voters, and then have an intelligent conversation about those local issues as a libertarian. And that's the difference. And I think what you're saying is, and I think, what was it, Apollo who was the man on the ground in those far western states?
It was indeed candidate support specialist Apollo Pazell,
right.
for the National Libertarian Party was on the ground there. Yes,
right.
And I'll tell you right now, there's. To be perfectly frank with you, Pat, and you know this as well as I do, there's not a lot of true political professionals, politicos, if you will, in the Libertarian Party.
Right.
Apollo is an example of a true professional who knows how to win elections.
Right.
We need more of these people in the Libertarian Party. We need to make sure that when we have a potential politico, we don't chase them away.
Right.
We need to understand that the goal of a political party, and this next statement, I'll tell you right now, is controversial in libertarian circles, and it certainly shouldn't be, okay? But the goal of a political party is to elect its candidates to political office, period, end of sentence.
Oh, my God.
And I think it is, I know, just shock, right? But yes, that's what we're here to do. That doesn't mean we don't educate. That doesn't mean we don't advance the libertarian philosophy and show how it can affect everyday lives in a positive manner. But, not even but, and then we elect libertarian candidates. It's all about electing candidates. That's what the purpose of a political party is.
Won't that render us?
Won't that party needs to focus upon?
But doesn't voting and the very fact that we're caving in a sense to the system, doesn't that make us somehow impure?
Well, my argument to that is simply there are many different outlets for such a viewpoint. There are many different outlets that exist in order to promote libertarian ideology.
Right.
The Libertarian Party is for electing libertarian candidates.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly, because ultimately, you don't get to make the changes we so desperately want unless we have people in positions of power to do them. Simply wishing upon a star ain't going to cut it. No one, I think it's fair to say, after a couple hundred years of American history, that no one in the political sphere is going to simply wake up and do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. I'm sensing that. I kind of held out for that for a few years myself, and that somehow, walking away from the process does not send a stab of philosophical purity to those people who dirty their hands, quote unquote, by being in the process. What, frankly, it does is make you irrelevant. If it's not your thing, if you simply want to engage in esoteric activities, what I call how many libertarians fit on the pin of the pin of a needle, you can do that. But don't expect the world to change because of some sudden deathbed philosophical conversion to the path of truth and righteousness. Has it happened for you yet? Oh, you out there, Chris?
Nope, I'm mute. My apologies. Cell phone stuck on mute button. You know how that happens.
There you go.
But so yes, to the point here, the only way that we are going to successfully change not only policy, but the very paradigm of politics in this country is to elect candidates that are not Democrats and they're not Republicans.
Right.
The only way to do that and to ensure that those policy changes take into account our libertarian ideals and our libertarian principles is to elect libertarian candidates. And just to put a pin in it, this is what we've got to do. We've got to focus on electing candidates. Now, I tell you what, if you'll bear with me, Pat, I want to switch a couple of gears here for just a second, and to just talk about the ways in which we can actually redouble our focus on electing candidates. I think that we're at a crossroads as far as the national Libertarian Party goes, and I'll just go ahead and qualify this right now by saying, the conditions on the ground are, of course, different with every state. Rhode Island has a unique set of challenges, just as Wyoming or New Mexico do as well. But when it comes to the National Party and what the National Party is able to do, we need to reevaluate and see what's been working, what doesn't work. What I think does work is what's happened in Wyoming. When National does put resources into real, professionally run campaigns, it makes a big difference. Did we get over the hump this time? No, we didn't. But I don't think there's any question that the concept, that we proved out that the concept of focusing on small, winnable races does work. Now, there are many things that the National Party can do in order to give the local and state parties the best chance of electoral success that is not currently being done. There's infrastructure that needs to be in place. There are lobbying activities that need to be stepped up a bit. We need to do a much better job at our communications. Just today, the National Committee released a press release that basically was rather confusing in what it said. Basically saying that making light of the fact that the Libertarian Party covered the spread between the Republican and Democratic candidates in the House in this is in North Carolina and in what was the other one, in Texas. Now, it doesn't really the reason for the press release, it doesn't make any sense. We shouldn't be touting the fact that we covered the spread in any races. We shouldn't be touting the fact that we quote played spoilers, shall we say. But in addition, I have a question that might fly in the face of some people here, but why are we still focusing on press releases? The press is literally a dying industry. Newspaper circulation across the country is dwindling to almost completely unsalvageable numbers. Now, yes, I understand the meaning behind a quote press release has changed dramatically over the years, but in effect, we are simply not doing a good job of communicating our messages when we're focused on sending little pieces of paper that maybe 2 or 3 media outlets will pay attention to, and then some emails here and there, and then there's no follow-up. Where is professionally produced video coming out of the National Party? Where are effective social media campaign strategies coming out of the National Party? It's just not there. We've got to restructure how we disseminate communications from the Libertarian Party. In addition to that, we need to understand that the Libertarian Party's brand, not branding, mind you, I'm not getting into arguments about logos and colors, but I am getting into, I do want to make the argument that the negative connotation that libertarian has to be addressed, and we have to do a better job of proactively describing what the Libertarian Party is and how it can help better individuals' lives. We're not doing a very good job of that right now. We're not doing a very good job of lobbying to change laws around the country that make it harder for independent third-party candidates to not just get on the ballot, but to get elected. I do think that it's time that a comprehensive strategy come out of the National Party to challenge laws, both ballot access laws, and also we have to consider some dramatic electoral reforms. I think it's time to start talking about putting ballot initiatives in states where that's possible to implement ranked choice voting. I think it's time that we start talking about state libertarian parties making a push for proportional representation in state legislatures. It's time that we not just do this piecemeal ballot access where we go and we do petition drives and we try to get on the ballot and then we try to stay on the ballot. We need to take a much more proactive role in getting rid of these laws, changing the very paradigms of how we elect candidates, and also we have to do something. We should be making stronger arguments to ensure voter integrity. Reform when it comes to the use of actual voting machines. You look at what's happening right now in Florida, where who knows what's happening to the ballots between the time that they're put in the machine to the time they're being counted. Who knows if who really knows if electronic voting machines haven't been hacked to death? I mean, there are so many unknowns and so many questionable practices that happen across the country when it comes to voter integrity, integrity of the vote itself, that we really need to do a better job of arguing for reforms in these areas.
Exactly. I'm not sure why, given our status as the third largest party in the country, understanding that there's a significant drop-off between number 2 and number 3, I'm not sure why we haven't inserted ourselves more in the national conversation on that. And I'm talking about talking head media appearances at a national level. I'm talking about op-eds. I'm talking about really just essentially trying to hijack whatever media can be made available to us. I just don't understand why in the year 2018 our senior leadership only shows up for a couple weeks before an election, and otherwise occasionally, sending out a missive through Twitter. We have a story to tell. It's compelling. It's certainly unique, and we don't tell it often enough at a national level through broadcast media. And then as a result, the brand suffers, and we allow others to define us. What do we do about that?
Well, I think going back, the question to me is, well, actually, let's step back for a second. Let's talk about organizational capabilities as they stand right now. Mm-hmm. The fact is, the National Libertarian Party, when you compare to the Leviathan that is the two-party duopoly, the resources the National Party has at its disposal are few and far between. Okay, we're talking a $2 million budget versus $200 million budgets. Okay, so to an extent, we have to understand that yes, we know we're at a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. My problem is that we are not utilizing the resources we have in the most effective manner. When I see tone-deaf press releases and no other way, I don't see anything surrounding the release of a press release. I don't see an online media strategy that goes and hammers this all day when something is announced. I don't see any pretty things like video and in this day and age, if we're going to do the job of actually not just convincing people to vote for us, but also convincing people that we actually exist, we have to make them aware of our presence.
Right.
And to your point, we need to have more talking head media appearances. We need to utilize the media as much as possible, and the way to do that is to give them a reason to give a damn.
Right.
We have to present professional organization. We have to present a professional and serious front for the party in order to have the media pay attention to us.
Right.
And I think that if we're talking about party organizational strength, that's our biggest weakness right now. Our organization simply does not have the infrastructure, and I think one of the reasons we don't is because for too long the national office in particular has had a certain structure that I just don't think is the most. It's just not the most efficient use of resources, and a lot of that. Let me step back right quick and qualify that statement, because this is not a knock on anyone who actually works and does the work in the national office at all.
Right.
Let me tell you what, some of these people, you would not believe the hours that they put in. I'll tell you right now, there's some individuals at that office. I go back to 2016. They are still there. They have worked. These two in particular come to mind have been volunteers and actual staffers. Were it not for Nick Dunbar and especially Bob Johnston, I tell you what, without Bob, there is no way we would have been on all 50 state ballots in 2016. The amount of work that they do is amazing. Also, outgoing executive director Wes Benedict. I'll tell you right now, if it was not for Wes's help, the Libertarian Party of Connecticut would not have been on the ballot for the governor race this year. I was working. I coordinated that drive. Could not have done it without Wes's help. So, there are plenty of other. I could literally go down the staff list right now and sing their praises, because there are so many good people that do great work in that office.
How many?
Too much of their time is spent putting out fires.
Right.
There is no strategic planning. There is no organizational. There's very little organization plans of action. It's like we're literally playing whack-a-mole, and that's got to change. That's how we better utilize the resources we have, is by becoming more efficient with them and investing in some serious strategic planning and knowing how to take issues and actually affect political change.
Because ultimately, there's two issues here at stake. The obsession, if you will, with ballot access, and the degree that obsession then drives resources away from the actual campaigns. And given the patchwork quilt of ballot access laws that currently exist, I mean, there's no uniform national law. There's no uniform national approach. It's insane, to tell you the truth. But we end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on quote-unquote ballot access. So maybe, you can give us a few examples. Here in Rhode Island, ballot access to us isn't really that big of a deal. With 1,000 signatures, we're on the ballot as a Libertarian on any executive branch position, both nationally and or on the state level. For 100 signatures, we've got a candidate on the ballot as a Libertarian for a state senator. What are some examples of states where the only way to get ballot access is through having a candidate run what is seemingly sometimes a doomed campaign for high office? And why is ballot access that important in some of these states?
Well, let's start out with a bit of a history on why ballot access laws were originated in the first place. And in almost every case, the reason ballot access laws actually were put on the books was for the Republican and the Democratic parties to protect their interest in being the only relevant two parties in American politics. Mm-hmm. We forget that there have been as many as 6 political realignments in this nation. And basically, parties were I won't say constantly, but were consistently changing every generation, shall we say, at least, more like every 10, 20 years, right. All the way up until right after the Civil War. Now, basically, these laws exist in certain states. They are egregious. In certain states, they're not that hard. But again, they simply exist to make sure that the Republican and Democratic Party are the only options that are considered viable.
Right.
Now, in a state like New Jersey comes to mind, I think New Jersey's signature requirement to get on the ballot is for statewide races is something like 800. So, okay, that might not seem as that high of a threshold. However, the placement of the ballot, basically, the ballot actually physically says Republicans, Democrats, and then it says minor parties, or maybe not minor parties, but others by petition. So basically, it segregates the Republicans and the Democrats from every other political party that is petitioned. So that's a perfect example of, okay, the signature requirement might not be that high, but still a distinction is made. No, these are your only real options. Okay. Now let's talk about a state like New York. New York has required thousands of 15,000, I think, signatures. Actually, excuse me, more than that. I don't have the statute in front of me, but tens of thousands of signatures to get on the ballot and that's the only way that a candidate can get on the ballot, statewide candidate. Now, to you and I, we know the details here, but for those who are not aware, that doesn't just mean, let's say we have to get, the requirement is 15,000 signatures. That means we have to get 15,000 people to sign. No. That's 15,000 valid voter signatures, meaning we have to get upwards of 30,000 to ensure that even if it was a qualified voter hasn't made a mistake, if they have moved and they've made a mistake on their address from it's different now from when they registered. Okay, we'll strike that signature. So there's so many instances where we have to go well above and beyond the actual signature requirement. Now, there are states such as Illinois. Illinois is another one. Illinois has some ridiculous requirements. It's more than 17,000 signatures, but at the same time, the validity rate is rather low in that state, so you have to collect 35,000 signatures or so. Not only that, you have to get every single page notarized. You have to make sure that all of these pages are then constructed into a single book for delivery to the Secretary of State's office. So I want you to visualize right quick. Visualize a giant petition book, like 6 feet high, being dumped on the table of the Secretary of State's office. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, and so circling back, your point that the Libertarian Party spends an awful lot of money on ballot access. Yes, we do. Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. However, I would make the argument that it's not something we can cheap out on. It's not an effort that we can stop. We have to do that because if we can't even get on the ballot, we don't have any chance, obviously, of winning. I go back to a hockey meme. Wayne Gretzky says, 100% of the shots you don't take don't go in, right? So there you go. That being said, I do think that we need to focus more as a matter of priority for the national committee, for the national office, focus more on efforts to change laws, not just ballot access laws as far as signature requirements, which traditionally we have done a decent job arguing, especially in court cases and whatnot for, but how do we implement things that the Republicans and Democrats hate, like ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting? There are alternative methods of voting available. Do I think there's a perfect one yet? Maybe not perfect, but there's certainly better than what we've got now. And I think that the Libertarian Party needs to take the step to start arguing for these laws. And it's not just a question of lobbying. There are states in which the ballot initiative process, i.e. circulating petitions, which is something we're good at, obviously, but circulating petitions for ballot questions to be,
right.
Be they constitutional amendments, be they changes to the law, these questions would then be presented to the voters, and the voters would vote on them. That's something the Libertarian Party needs to take the lead in saying, all right, these laws are corrupt. They have kept the Republicans and the Democrats in power for far too long. Here is a mechanism in which we can work to change. And I think that in addition to focusing on winnable campaign races,
right.
in addition to focusing on ballot access, we need to start focusing on ballot initiatives where we can actually change the electoral process in this country, state by state.
Right. And ultimately it varies state by state. In a state like Rhode Island, school boards and water boards have visibility, just because the state is so damn small. If you're a town council person in New York, you have the opportunity to affect at a very fundamental level entire generations, but at the same time, you're not going to get that buzz of running for the big deal. Personally, I think we need to draw it back a whole nother step and be focused on hyperlocal races. That's what I believe. All the cliches apply: bench strength, support personnel, things like that. I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask this. In my opinion, this whole drive we went through this year to put all sorts of people on the ballot, I think was hopelessly misplaced. And that's not even remotely attempting to denigrate or minimize or marginalize the work that all these people did. Because almost all of these candidates, whether they got 2% or whether they got 38%, I consider running for office one of the highest acts of patriotism for a country because of the exposure that you bring to yourself, the microscope you bring to yourself, the hours away from family. It's just tough. It's just really tough. So I'm not minimizing their efforts whatsoever. They're my heroes. But at the same token, on a national level, did we really serve our best interests by having people run for office who should have been acting as support personnel and or fundraising? That's my million-dollar question, and I will answer absolutely. Running for office is not for everyone, nor should it be considered some universal good.
Well, hear me out. I think that the Libertarian Party specifically needs to have a three-pronged approach when it comes to candidate recruitment and candidates actually running. First of all, we do need to run candidates in races that secure ballot access. Because, again, if you're not on the ballot, you can't be voted for. So we have several successes of that this year. Neighboring Massachusetts, of course, Dan Fishman polled enough in a statewide race to ensure ballot access for the Massachusetts Libertarian Party. The same for Oklahoma, Indiana. Mark Rutherford ran a fantastic campaign for Secretary of State. That's the state's ballot access race there. So ballot access, once again, achieved or continued anyway in those states. So that's number one. And those races, maybe they're not all winnable, but they are necessary in order to achieve ballot access or to keep ballot access. So that's number one. Number two, small winnable races with win numbers with very low win numbers where we can put resources, target the resources into these specific races as opposed to spreading them out. Because remember, I know that everybody liked to fundraise for their own little race here and there, and I'm with you. To the people that ran this time around, thank you, because there is no greater calling for anybody who is actually wants to see change in their lifetime than to actually run for office. That takes a lot of guts. So thank you. It's up to us to now focus on the races where we can actually compete and we can actually win instead of spreading our resources very thin. Now, third, and this may be a bit of a controversial opinion, I know a lot of people like the bottom-up approach. Now, I guess I'm arguing sort of a hybrid because, yes, we need to focus on these small, winnable races where a lot of or a small number of resources can go a long way.
Right.
But we also cannot take our eye off the big picture. And I make the argument that the absolute only way to change the paradigm of American politics, to smash through that glass ceiling, is to elect a president of the United States who is not a member of the Democratic or Republican parties. I make the argument we cannot lose sight of that goal. Yes, we can win city council races and we can win small state races here and there. We can get state legislators elected. However, in order to change the paradigm, in order to change the very mentality of the American electorate, the only way we can get rid of the two-party system once and for all is to elect a president who is an independent. And I know that some people disagree with this. Some people think that our nominee should be, someone who is 100% ideological libertarian, by the book, taxation is theft, eliminate the government, et cetera, which, I'm not necessarily opposed to those things. However, it's a question of smashing the two-party duopoly once and for all and changing the concept, the very concept of American politics going forward. And electing a president is the only way to do it.
I understand, and I guess that's always been this question right now has fueled many a Facebook thread, sometimes into the hundreds of comments, sometimes into a full week. The problem is, as I see it right now, we're going to constantly, in order to up the name game, we're going to constantly find ourselves recruiting Liberty Republicans or people with some type of panache, street name value, and those elections are. I mean, for example, let's take Rhode Island. We had a Democratic governor who, by all intents and purposes, should have been weak. The major opponents in campaigns ran miserable campaigns, just miserable. Not addressing the issues, not attempting to define her, just utter misery. In the Rhode Island case, you had a ruthless, corporatist governor type absolutely crush opposition. So, you had this litany of miseries, and as someone who was there and just, trying to make something happen, it's very frustrating. I think as important as it is to have candidates out there, I think we run the risk of burning people out on campaigns that have, few opposing viewpoints. But that's my opinion.
I don't disagree with the burnout whatsoever, and I'm not sure how we are on time here. If we can keep going on it.
Yeah, we got a couple more minutes.
Rhode Island. Say that one more time, sorry, Pat.
Yeah, we got a couple more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So real quick, to your point about name recognition, I didn't necessarily say that it needs to be. We need to sell out.
Right.
Excuse me. I certainly did not say that we need to sell out.
Right. No, I absolutely agree. I know you didn't.
But I guess, we need to get away from this idea of Liberty Republicans or even Liberty Democrats. No, we need libertarians, period.
Right.
But anyway, I want to shift in the short time we have left and just talk briefly about Rhode Island itself. Rhode Island does have an interesting situation, of course, because you have the Democratic Party who have dominated politics for, decades. And you also have this odd streak of independents. Now, some of whom might not necessarily be independent in reality. I think of former governor, senator, and governor comes to mind who might not have been, might not be ideologically what we consider independent. But nonetheless, the potential exists in Rhode Island for independent and third-party candidates, and specifically libertarians. to reach electoral success. I think this particular election has been more of an anomaly, especially in Rhode Island, because of such a divisive partisan nature and a narrative that's been hyper-partisan nationally.
Right.
I think that had a dramatic effect on turnout everywhere, but also in Rhode Island. I think that, I understand your argument about ballot access maybe not being the number one priority of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party, but I've got to tell you, I think there's actually there is an opportunity with the moderate party no longer being ballot qualified. I do think there is an opportunity to get funding as well from the state. There are some while once we get in power, we can eliminate government funding for political parties. It does exist right now, so I am a full believer that we should take advantage of the resources if they are being offered. Then we work to get rid of them, as I say again. But I do think there is an opportunity in Rhode Island to kind of reinvigorate that revolutionary spirit. I loved the fact that Rhode Island declared independence a couple months before the rest of the states got around to it. And I think we ought not forget that spirit can be revived, and I do think Rhode Island can actually be quite a factor in returning our nation to the concept of peace and prosperity, and that's what we're here for. I mean, let's be real. At the end of the day, what unites us as libertarians and unites us as individuals outside of the two-party system is that we see how corrupt, we see how wrong the status quo is.
Right.
What unites us is wanting to return to the ideals where, we are allowed to try for our own prosperity, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what we're here for, to get back to that instead of tax and spend us into oblivion, and then you're not allowed to do whatever you want to do in your own bedroom. If you happen to harvest a plant, you get thrown in jail. I mean, we've gone so far away from where we need to be. And I think we do well to remember that this is a revolutionary spirit that we're all involved in here, and we need to cultivate that everywhere we can. And I do think Rhode Island's going to be a part of it going forward.
Wow. Tall waters and something that's going to require, a regular revisit, because the real opportunity exists now. This is really the best time to address those issues, both at the state level and whatever reporting mechanism may exist for political organizations in your given state. Always remember, incrementalism is the devil. At the same time, attention needs to be drawn to this. We can't go into another election cycle 2 years from now, running the entire party, having hundreds, if not thousands, of candidates running at every single level without any coordination, and then expect them to succeed. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
And I will just to underline that, you're absolutely right. We need to focus again on the races that give us ballot access and races that we can actually win. Be they local city council races, be they state legislative races. We have to focus on winnable races instead of a plethora of candidates. Let's come up with metrics that actually show where we can win. Let's focus our resources. We don't have as many resources as the two-party duopoly. So the resources that we do have, let's focus where we can win.
Well, I think this is an issue that you and I need to continue to visit. And so my suggestion is going to be that we, every few weeks, while we're in sort of repose, if you will, while the electoral system has sort of gone into a resting phase, for at least 3 months, right? I fully expect to see declarations for office by Easter, by May Day, if you will. I think you and I need to revisit this on a regular basis and share our viewpoints, share it with the libertarian community, and ask them for their input. What do you say to that?
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure, and this is we're at the beginning of a long conversation that has to happen. I even promised most people that I would save my election postmortems until save them until next week. But when the opportunity arose to come on here and discuss with you, I was happy to take it, and I thank you again for the time and look forward to our future discussions.
No, absolutely. Christopher Thrasher, man about town, libertarian extraordinaire, involved intimately in national libertarian politics, and at the same time involved intimately on a professional level in ballot access, petitioning issues, really literally across the country. A unique bird's eye seat from his 2016 experience, and he continues to bring that wisdom and sort of on the job, boots on the ground level experience to a libertarian affiliate near you. Every time I talk to him every few days, it's astonishing because you're not just in another state, you're typically in another time zone. In the past 2 weeks since I've seen you in Rhode Island, you've been as far away, I think, as the Pacific Northwest, as far away as the Great Southwest, and everywhere just about in between. So you are the Energizer rabbit, if you will, of libertarian politics, and my hat's off to you, buddy.
Well, thank you, good sir. Again, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're actually in the same time zone, believe it or not, because I flew from Seattle over. I'm in Baltimore at the moment, of all places. So anyway, for a few days, and then it's back to the West Coast. But yes, indeed, I have a unique perspective from being able to be on the go. I see libertarians across the country. I see the hard work that they do. I see the blood, sweat, and tears that go into these efforts. And I want our national party to do a better job of making sure that all this blood, sweat, and tears goes into actual victories. And I think we've taken some great steps. I'd like to circle back once again. The fact that we're saying that nothing less than a win is acceptable, that in and of itself is a huge, huge improvement for the Libertarian Party over the years that I've been involved, and I look forward to what the future brings. So I'll shut up now, Pat. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, good sir.
All right, we'll be talking soon. Folks, stay tuned. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. I've got the folks from Boot Black brand Complex Cocktail and Soda Syrups here. As I mentioned in the run-up to the show today, we're going to be focusing on, we're going to have some fun and focusing on all the different startups, enterprises, companies that dot the Rhode Island landscape. Rhode Island is foodie heaven, and tonight kicks off, I think, a ongoing series of investigations into just the unique talents that entrepreneurs across this great state bring to the dinner table. Again, a big thank you to Chris Thrasher. We'll have this up in just a few moments. It's up there on the Facebook. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The Naked City, the city of 1,000 and more stories, and that's just in one night. It's a rainy night here down in Down City in La Prave, the perfect night, if you will, because it's always a good night to hunker down in that favorite bistro of yours, whether it be Red Stripe over in Wayland Square, whether it be the number of restaurants up on Atwell's. You know, there's no shortage of places to kind of get cozy tonight with a cocktail, something hearty, and to weather out what seems to be an unending series of storms here at the Naked City. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. We are, for the first time this holiday season, yes, it is the holiday season because I am hell-bent to promote goodwill and cheer after the madness of the past few weeks. For the first time in the holiday season, we are the Holiday Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, and full, despite the madness, full of pre-holiday cheer. Yes, Thanksgiving is just a few weeks away. We live in the foodie capital of the universe. Boston got nothing on us. New York, yeah, corporate nonsense. We've got the very best of everything. We have the raw materials, first of all. Great local farms, seafood, pork products, beef products, everything built and harvested here. We've got the best wild seafood in the universe. And we've got entrepreneurs actually creating wild seafood farms off of our coast, right in our backyards, for the best and freshest seafood anywhere. So what's the missing ingredient then? We've got all this great raw materials. We've got talented people from places like Rizzi and Jaywu who provide us with places and environments and ambiance to enjoy the finest foods in. And what is yet to be explored, I think, as much as necessary, is the individual talents for people who create all the different embellishments, sauces, ingredients, that other step that's so important in terms of food preparation. We are the best, and that's what we're going to focus on with a in-your-face positive attitude that only the Coalition can bring you. We were out and about a few weeks ago, myself and Daryl Gould, and there is an institution called Hope in Maine, which is, well, right in downtown Bristol, right? Or is that Bristol or Warren? Right in downtown Warren. Can't mix those two things up. People take that personally. Whew, I found that out. Right in downtown Warren. Now, that was a former school building?
Correct.
Former school building that's been turned into, for a few years now, a very successful food incubator. So what you've got there, one of the great challenges, and I'm going to turn this over to you in just a second, but it appears to me as an outsider, someone who obviously spends a lot of time consuming food, but not at all good at preparing it, the necessary ingredients are the test kitchens, the control systems, the mentoring, the collaboration, the skills necessary to take what may be a really cherished homegrown recipe, from everything from chili and hot sauce to what we're going to talk about tonight, and take that into a marketable product, which not only is great tasting, but, and this is the critical part as an outsider, is consistent. It's manufactured in a safe environment. It is a deliverable product through distribution channels, and has the potential to become a product with its own product life cycle, or potentially a product that will be sold into a larger food company. And that's the secret sauce, taking it from, hey, I've got an idea, and I'm going to move it up to the next level, and actually having that take place. This whole gestation process, if you will, that brings a product from, that design and idea, that hallelujah moment where the light bulb goes off, to where we are today with this product. It's Paul is with the Boot Black brand complex cocktail and soda syrups. We ran into him. I was bowled over by the taste explosion, if you will, and I'm not using empty rhetoric here. It really is a taste explosion of what they're manufacturing right there here in Little Rhodey. So welcome to the Coalition.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, how did you? We spoke earlier. You come from a graphics background, and it manifests itself very well in your own product design. That's kind of a unique aspect. You've got extensive experience in terms of product design and marketing, which you bring to your superior food product. That's pretty unique. But how did you get involved with Hope in Maine, and what kind of magic takes place there?
So I would not have a business if it wasn't for Hope in Maine today. I started 3 years ago with an idea. And at that time, from the East Bay, driving through, I always saw this Hope in Maine sign. What is it? So one day I just walked in, and they explained to me what they do. And at that time, I had my original recipe of the ginger cardamom lime. It was on the back burner. It was an idea I always had. And up to that point, what do you do with an idea in the food and beverage industry? There's no inroads, and that's where Hope in Maine comes in. They will take you, they will teach you, they will show you how to get licensing, how to make a shelf-stable product so nobody gets hurt down the road, how to market it, how to find distribution, how to get on shelves.
Right.
And that's what they're there for. And they're there for the beginner, or they're there for a seasoned veteran who maybe just needs a little help along the way.
So it's really a food university.
It is, oh yeah, quite definitely.
Yeah, and take one aspect of that. You talk about getting the product on the shelves. There is plenty of great product that is sitting in someone's garage from its inability to get it out onto the shelves. There is a battle that's never been harder for shelf space in America's supermarkets, and or now the new playing field, of course, which is online sales. So the ability to have, like I said, the mentoring aspect to bring you through that. I would also imagine that having been involved in startups can be very lonely. How you know, there could be some long nights. I would imagine as you've grown the product line, we'll talk about that in a second, there were some nights where it might not have worked out so well the first couple of times. How important is it to be surrounded by people in the same challenges?
And that's one of the beauties of being a food incubator. I can walk in, I can see Pat who makes sauce. And I can say, hey Pat, how's it going? And you can tell me how your day is going and vice versa. And being, again, all these lonely people, there's nothing better for that camaraderie of, I know you're going through the same thing I'm going through, or you did in the past, or you may be in the future. So to be able to bounce ideas off each other or just have a grape session is wonderful.
Right. I've, you know, over the last couple of years, I've been over there a few times, had everything from pickles to hot sauce. Let's talk about your product, because this is not at all, let's just say this, there's a lot of hot sauces, there's a lot of root beers out there, all great stuff. Truly, I admire anyone who can innovate and create a product. Your product's fairly unique, so give us kind of the history of how you came up with this, and explain to me, what is a complex cocktail soda or syrup?
Well, when I first started the business, I knew there was no way I could compete with the everyday product out there. When you can just throw money at an idea, you're usually going to win.
Right.
So my idea was, okay, I can't come up with a simple syrup. I need something different. And mine is about more on the culinary aspect of things, building great, bold flavors that work great with spirits or just as a soda. So that was the idea. And the way it started was sitting in a bar.
Excellent.
Sitting at all the best businesses out there. Don't they?
Greatness can come from
Yeah, and the greatness came because I was really unhappy with the cocktail I was drinking. And on a number of occasions that's happened. And I never understood. There's no reason to have a bad cocktail.
Right.
If you have good ingredients, you don't need many, just need some quality ingredients, you should be able to make a good cocktail.
And what's fascinating to me is right now there has never been a greater selection of spirits on this planet. I mean, the sheer size of the bourbon market, the American bourbon market, the single malt, the blend, I mean, on and on and on. Thousands of great products have popped up. The missing ingredient, my personal motto for years was the only mixer was ice, but the missing ingredient in all these craft cocktails was that next step, which is what are you using to bind the product together? What's a flavoring? What are you going to do to, because the beauty of your product, it's not a syrup per se in that it overwhelms or it replaces the flavor. What it does is it's designed to draw out the flavors of the spirit you're having and complement it with another set of flavors. Right. So that's the missing, and so great products come from people who answer questions we didn't even know we have. And that's why I'm entranced by this. So what was the first one? And you how did that come about?
So the first is our ginger cardamom lime. At the time, a few years back, I was into Kentucky Mules. Kentucky Mule is basically whiskey and ginger beer. Well, I didn't like the ginger beer that people were using. So one day I said, I can do better. It's a famous motto my dad always said. So I went home and I think I did better. And at the time I'd have friends and family over, make cocktails, and genius being, you should try to sell that. And being who I am, I said, yeah, why not?
Right.
Why not start a new business?
Seems like it's a perfectly obvious thing to me to wake up one day. Right. Yeah, exactly. What can possibly go wrong? Oof. Why not start a political party?
Yeah, right.
Seemed to make sense at the time. I probably should have been drinking your stuff instead of. So first of all, what is a mule?
So a mule is, everybody usually knows a Moscow mule is vodka and ginger beer.
Right.
Kentucky mule is just with whiskey. I loved whiskey, and I love the flavor of ginger. Nice little spice, nice little heat. So I wanted to take that idea and just develop it and make it more complex.
Right.
Hence the cardamom and the lime and all the baking spice. When I create all these syrups, I'm thinking on like an Amaro or a culinary experience.
Right.
I'm trying to build depth of flavor, so every time you take a sip, it tastes maybe a little different. So every time you have a sip, it's not bored. You're not bored with the drink in front of you.
Right.
So that's what I try to do.
Right. Well, no, and that's what to me is fascinating. So like I said, you're not just simply overwhelming and replacing the spirit, because let's be honest, these craft spirits are not inexpensive. So the point being, if you're looking for, and it's funny because we have a shared friend, John Zambato from the great Yacht Club Beverage Company. I always talk about why drink the refinery soda when you can actually taste what soda was meant to be. And you mentioned ginger. I'm not sure, unless you've experimented with, say, Thai cooking or something like that, I'm not sure if many people remember what real ginger tastes like.
At this point, right, it's very sugary, very watered, there's no heat, there's no complexity to it. If you take a bite of ginger, which you got to be careful of,
Right.
But it's amazing what true ginger will taste like.
Right, and so to that point, you're using very high quality product in terms of raw materials.
Right. So we take real ginger and infuse it in here. We take everything's cane sugar as a sweetener. Except in the ginger, we also have golden raisins. Kind of gives it a little honey quality to it.
Wow.
Then we have spices, and you sit there and you infuse all these flavors.
How do you figure that out, though? I mean, I've been to a few wine tastings in my day, and then I've been to a variety of whiskey tastings because like I said, I prefer whiskey. And how does one accomplish an understanding, whether it be cooking or in this case the syrups, of what's potentially out there? Were you just experimenting and did you buy a whole bunch of stuff and just start cooking it up one day in the kitchen?
In a way, what flavors I like, what I thought would be unique flavor combinations. For instance, the cranberry jalapeno. People go, what? Until they try it. Right.
You're not going to find cranberry jalapeno at your neighborhood 7-Eleven.
But it's my ode to New England. I wanted to do something New England.
Right.
So it was cranberry, so where do you go from there? I don't want cranberry sauce, I don't want cranberry syrup. What makes that unique? How can we make it unique and work?
Wow. Now, hey, were you a cook, or are you a cook in your...
My mother was a caterer for years, back in the 70s and 80s, so I grew up in the business. But once she retired, I went into design. I've been a graphic designer for 30 years. I run my own studio with my wife right now. We've had that for 18 years.
Right.
And then this came along.
Okay. So you started out with ginger, then you went to the cranberry jalapeno, and then give us your other two flavors here.
Then it was a tonic, because I love a gin and tonic. And
Who doesn't?
Just thought, the difference between using a syrup and a tonic water, I can do spirit-forward cocktails with that.
Right.
I can do split-base martinis and things like that. So I can get much more complex with the flavors and be a more spirit-forward cocktail that I prefer.
Right.
But then I can just make a great G&T with it.
And that's interesting to me because we've become a nation of vodka drinkers. And very few people appreciate, and I guess is it juniper that's involved in gin?
Gin.
Right. Very few people really seem to appreciate or take the time for a really great G&T. And on the right hot summer night, there is simply nothing better.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's again, just two ingredients, right? But if one of them is not good.
And there's, well, it's like tequila, any of these spirits. I mean, the problem is we've become, in a way, spoiled because the difference between, there are very few in the middles when it comes to gin. Vodka, by definition, is much more neutral, but when it comes to whiskeys and or gin, these are crafted beverages to begin with. So it's either really good or really bad.
And it could just be maybe left of center, right? Everybody's palate is different.
Right.
And that's what I try to tell people with these. When they ask me what a proportion, I go, well, I can start you off easy, but your palate's different than mine, and that's the beauty of it. You can decide.
Right. So now this, you're working, how does this complement the juniper in, say, in a G&T?
Well, what I have in here is I have a quinine extract, natural product. I have orange and lemon zest, so I zest orange and lemons. I make an oleosaccharum, so I put them in sugar and extract the oils naturally. That gets put into the bake. And then I have a little coriander, which it has a little orange tint to it, I want to say.
Right.
That just marries well with juniper, with the pininess. And then there's so many gins out there now that aren't piney. You know, the American gins go every which way. You know, right down the street, that Sons of Liberty, their Genevieve style gin is phenomenal. But if you tasted it, you may not recognize it as a gin.
I grew up in the school of Tanqueray. You know, a TNT was, in the 80s was, if you were a yuppie or wanted to be a yuppie in my case, and dreamed someday of being a yuppie, which I still do, because I couldn't delve into conspicuous consumption if I could only afford to. So I come from that very classic, the green bottle, wearing the salmon pants and the whole.
I was a beef eater guy. So again, the same London Dry.
Right.
That's what you had back then.
Right. Let's get back then to the manufacturing, because it sounds so simple. Yeah, you just this, and then you know you're shipping it by the case. You know, you're into full production mode.
Yeah.
Now let's take a moment. First of all, tell people your website.
It's bootblackbrand.com. Very easy to get to. You can buy online. It tells a little story there. It's very simple, clean. Most of the story is about cocktails. It's not. I don't ever believe it should be about me or what I do with the product. There's nothing there about me. To me, the product needs to speak for itself.
Right. So, is your production right now at Hope and Main, or are you now taking the next step?
I took the next step. I graduated in May. So I left the nest, and I'm in Pawtucket now.
Right.
Great facility, little commercial kitchen. There's no selling there. It's just production to make the product. And it's been wonderful in one way because I have it day and night. But on the other end, you lose a little of that, you know, mama looking over your shoulder.
Right.
Of Hope and Main. So they're still very supportive. We're always together. I'll be there Sunday at the farmers market. I still support that way,
Right.
And they support me because people know me in the area from starting there, which has
Right.
been wonderful.
And by the way, if you're looking for a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon, it's paradise. You've got, it's really sort of an East Bay extension and of what you'll see on Blackstone Boulevard. You've got, what I like is that both on Hope and Main and at the Blackstone Boulevard Farmers Market, there is a process there where you're not just getting people pretending to be something and shilling inferior product. So the coffee is there. There's a potato farmer there that produces, I'll call them heirloom style potato, 8 or 9 different potatoes on a small batch production. There is actually everything imaginable, and it's just a great way to spend the time in a great town. You know, you're downtown Warren, and by the way, if you get a chance, go to the Galactic Theater. If you're looking for a cocktail afterwards,
Ask for Dave.
Yeah, just ask for Dave. I think I'm on permanent probation there because you're not allowed to talk about politics. So, you know, I'm on the nice list right now, but you know, he keeps a watchful eye. There's a feel to that community, to Warren, that I just love. Great local restaurants. You could start the day at Hope and Main, walk into one of Rhode Island's most beautiful historic districts. You're down by the water, and then come up and have lunch or dinner at a great local restaurant.
How many restaurants? Now there's a dozen that
Right.
you could choose from and be happy.
Right.
It's incredible over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a wonderful community.
And Hope and Main starting Sunday will be indoors, so you don't have to worry about weather.
Right. And it's a great place. I'll just throw this out there, because if we're 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving, what are we then? We're 4 or 5 weeks away from Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, the whole gift-giving time. So here's the thing, particularly if you're our age, you can give the gift card, which is kind of hopelessly lame, but I understand why. I'm guilty of that often myself. Or if you've got someone in I think at this point in time, I think in Rhode Island, I think you have to be a foodie to be allowed in the state at this point. Because who isn't? I mean, you can't not be. Even if you don't think you are, your tastes are so discriminating. I always talk about the coffee exchange over on Wickenden Street. Starbucks has spent $1 billion trying to be a coffee exchange, and they never will be. They can't do it. So, it's a great place to buy Christmas presents and, put together gift baskets, things like that. Really unique, which actually shows that you invested some time and, showing an understanding of what people like. And maybe at the same time challenging them a little bit with something that might be a little bit of a little edgier than that. Maybe they've gotten comfortable with some of the things they do, and maybe it's time to kind of fire it up a little bit.
Up their game.
All right. So, and I know you go into this on someone on the website, but so what's a traditional? I know we talked about this, but give us again the cocktails that you would associate with each.
Okay, so over here you would have your Moscow Mule, or a rum and ginger beer. Can't call it what it truly is. Kentucky Mule.
Right.
Here, spicy margaritas.
Wow.
It's delicious. This is fantastic with China, which is an Amaro, and some grapefruit juice. This one's a little trickier, but just tequila, mezcal, rum, this, and lime. It's just easy. Three steps. Old fashioned. It's not going to get any easier than this.
Right.
An old fashioned is pretty simple, but how many bad old fashions have you had? So
I'm from New Jersey.
yeah. So
Okay.
So half ounce of this, 2 ounces of rye, you're done. Little stir. That's all there is to it. And your classic tonic for your gin, rum, or vodka tonics. Then you can delve in deeper once you get comfortable with the product.
Right.
But it's about 2 to 3 parts to each one, and you're done.
Right. And here's what's kind of neat about this. Let's just say you're not into going out on a given night. Maybe you're snowed in. Maybe the weather's a little rough. You've had a long week at work. What I love about this is this brings the experience of going out home. Yeah. You can, whether it be sitting in front of Netflix or something with whoever you sit in front of Netflix with, but you bring a little bit of that. We've got so many great local bars here. I mean, it's just again, it's kind of silly.
You can get our products out. So.
Right, and I'm going to ask you about that in a second. But you can recreate that kind of craft cocktail experience right in the comfort of your own home. You can experiment with a good bottle of spirits, and perhaps make a mistake or not. It's always important to clean up after one's mistakes by drinking them. One should never, ever, ever. No. We have standards here at the coalition about eliminating spare alcohol. Okay, we have rules. The first one is
your bottles, your Nickies, your grapes and grains in the East Bay and Brickyard. Further out to Massachusetts, we're at Boston Shaker, we're at Revelware and Needham. We're just starting to trickle over the line. In bars right across the street at Rogue Island, they have our ginger using this on a riff on a Kentucky Mule on tap. So they pour it right out of the tap. And thanks to
God, technology is a wonderful thing.
And then from Origin, they put me on tap there, which is incredible.
Right.
I can walk in and get my own cocktail in a bar. It's amazing after a couple of years.
Well, that's got to be a hell of a feeling, though. I mean, you've kind of steered this through the long nights, and I guess it's sort of akin to, you've been on the road with a rock and roll band, and one day you're driving along, you turn the radio on, and they're playing your song.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we're in the Eddie Bar and Dirt's Barbecue in the summer.
Yeah.
It doesn't get better. To be able to say that to people, it's pretty
Well,
humble.
because both of those establishments, as Rogues Island, is the attention and that's paid to ingredients now. I mean, and there's the days. I mean, I grew up in Jersey, where chicken parm, and there's nothing wrong with chicken parm, believe me.
Nothing wrong with it, no.
It made me the man I am today. But it's just we're at a completely different level here in Rhode Island. If you have chicken parm, it's probably free range chicken, and the the cheese was probably crafted on the west side earlier that morning, and it's served on, it's served with Italian bread from 7 Stars or French bread from 7. We're just at a completely different level. So these are restaurants that are not going to allow themselves to be blunt, to take a hit on one of the most important parts of the restaurant, which is the selection of spirits that complements it. So now you did bring a sample. God bless you.
On this rainy night.
Oh, absolutely. And so what have you brought with you?
So what I brought today was I batched up, and this can be really easy to do at home, and it can be awfully dangerous.
Right.
So this is our old fashioned.
Right.
So it's 1 pot old fashioned syrup, 4 pots of rye or whiskey. You could do rum, you could do gin. But tonight we have some Battle Cry from Sons of Liberty.
Oh, okay, great. I have yet to make the trip there.
Really?
I know.
Here, typical Rhode Island. So this is cold. This has a little dilution in it. So since I'm not stirring it here, I did add just a touch of water in the bottle. That makes up for the lack of us actually stirring the cocktail with a little ice.
To Rhode Island.
To Rhode Island.
Oh my God, that's good. Holy cow. Wow.
So, I love drinking whiskey. It's just neat, it's beautiful. But sometimes I just want a little more. So that this syrup just, cuts that heat and adds a bunch of baking spice to it. And has that gentian root, which is taking the place of your bitters.
Yep.
So it's all there in the bottle.
Wow, that's outstanding. Give us, I know you're out there pressing the flesh. Bartenders, it's funny. My late uncle was a bartender at a very different time when it was lining up the shots.
Oh, yeah.
Guys would come in, bang, bang, eat a sandwich, bang, bang, go to work. Bartenders are the new chefs at restaurants. I'm old enough to remember when celebrity chefs became a thing, really in the 80s. The new celebrities are bartenders. Motif Magazine actually does a great job. They feature different bartenders from time to time from different establishments. What's the craziest thing you've seen done with their?
People don't go crazy with it. Probably the most complex cocktails I've seen would be with my ginger. Great bartender, Catherine Hood from the Eddy, has a pop-up tiki bar. She does.
Of course.
8 C's Tiki. It's once a month, and actually this month it's going to be at Quantum Club. So last year we sponsored her, and she made about 4 or 5 different tiki cocktails, which are very complex,
right?
Very layered. So that was probably the most refined palette I've.
See, I'm not cool enough to know where pop-up bars are.
That's the wonderful thing about this industry.
Yeah.
Coming from design, from the corporate world into the food and beverage industry, people are so friendly and so willing to help you.
Right.
It blows my mind how goodwill people are in this industry. I'm old enough to be most of their dads.
Cheers.
But they treat me just like one of the guys, and as a good friend of theirs, no matter where you go.
Right.
And in this industry, in a short time, I probably know half the people involved.
Right.
Just by walking in. I may not remember their name because I met so many people, but they're always friendly with good cheer and always asking, how are you doing? How can we help?
One of the great things about Providence is it is a scene. It is this moving scene where the cast of characters may change. I moved here, the first night I lived here was the last night of the original Lupo's Heartbreak Hotel. And I went there for closing night and I said, my God. But Lupo's, the spirit of that, I believe, lives on in the Met down in Pawtucket. If you're a Rhode Islander and you've only lived here a few years and you haven't been to the Ocean Mist down in Mesquamaket, you're missing something pretty unique. By this time of the year, it's gone from being a beachfront bar to a waterfront bar. There's a difference. Right, and so the waves are gently lapping at about, but it's a scene. It really is, and you know, we always joke about it in Rhode Island, there are no degrees of separation. That is so true in the hospitality business, and that extends into the bands that that do the circuit. It's again, sometimes, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I get obsessed with whatever scandal du jour is happening or whatever chaos is going on up at Halitosis Hall, but there's a unique quality of life here that I think at times is supported by our challenges, because there's when things get tough, this is a community, particularly in the hospitality community, that really comes together to support each other. And everything from restaurants to unique products like this. I'm gotta take a break. That's the fun part about this.
And you see in the industry where people come and go from the same bar and restaurant. You'll see them in one place, then they'll go somewhere else, and,
Right.
and they're offered to come back.
Right.
There's no animosity because you want to better yourself or you need a different experience. I find that wonderful.
How much of a challenge it is? You're manufacturing here in Rhode Island. In terms of, and this is a question I've asked of a couple of folks who are doing not the same product by any means, but the challenge is sourcing ingredients. I mean,
So sourcing, figuring that whole monster up. Even to back up from there, I don't come from this industry. I don't come from any manufacturing industry. So everything is a challenge since day one. Again, with the help of Hope and Maine, they get you started.
Right.
But from there, it's up to you. So not only sourcing, but how can I source a better product? How can I source
Right.
a less expensive product? How can I make this affordable for people on the shelf so they'll actually purchase it?
well, that's the not so delicate balance. I mean, on one hand, if you go crazy and you get the rarest, finest ingredients, but you still have to, even though it's a premium product, we mentioned when we were setting up for the show, I mean, a product like this, there's always room for the very best. That people in Rhode Island, despite the adventure that is living in Rhode Island, seem to always make. I mean, Friday night we could all be broke, but we're all out to dinner. We just are. Somehow we maybe changed diving under the car, but we managed to get out. But again, I mean, is there, for something like ginger, and I always use that as an example because I've had this conversation with John Zimbato and a few other people. I mean, how, in one sense, the very best is such an exotic product, yet because of the restaurant community, the capacity exists in this town to go out and buy the very best?
You can, but it's finding that sauce, right? It's like, where do you get that from?
Right.
That's what I find is harder. You can find anything you want. It's finding the person that has it.
Right.
And that's just asking one person after the next, where do you get your stuff from? Where can I, and so on. And once you source that, you're good for a while, but then you say, okay, now, how can I do better? Can I do less expensive? Can I, and so on. That's all you do now. The product becomes the business. It doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
What I'm putting in the bottle. It becomes of how do you do business better.
Now, again, the few of the people I talk to, product development, while you're simultaneously marketing a product, while you're simultaneously overseeing production, it can be hard. I mean, you have to rip yourself away from the day-to-day and continue to expand. Do you have anything secret that you're working on in the back rooms? I mean, and what's your process for product development? I mean, that to me is fascinating. What is an entrepreneur like you? Do you wake up one day with that light bulb, or?
It's usually something, I take it very personal, something I want.
Right.
That's how I begin. And then usually it's just an idea, something I might have read, something I might have seen and said, oh, that's interesting. I've never done something with whatever. How can I take that? Can I make it bootleg? Can I make it unique? Not to do another cranberry syrup,
Right.
And that's how my thought process goes, and I just mull over it for maybe days and maybe weeks. It may just be, oh, I got the idea, and I'm going to start off, and then within a couple of hours, it's ready to go. So it's just, I let it just go as it wants to go, because I already have 4 products. This is enough to manage for now.
Right.
So, as you know, to have another product is more packaging. It's just more money, basically. And can we make a go with what we have people happy with what we have, and we can tweak a little bit and then grow the number of SKUs.
Right, and that's a challenge. I mean, it's innovate, expand, or become complacent.
Right, right. And then sometimes you're forced to be complacent. You know, because for me it's financial. I've bootstrapped this from the beginning. It was all on myself and my wife. So we're talking dollars, not millions of dollars.
Right.
So every penny is okay. We need to get packaging this week. We need labels. How are we going to do that?
Right.
It's not let's just go out and buy whatever we feel like. It hasn't been that since the beginning.
Right. There's no magic blank check.
No blank check.
and the challenge too. I feel well, go out and get a load, but there's got to be a plan. There's got to be. You've got to see that progression taking place organically. You can't necessarily force it by simply just ramping up production and hope it sells.
Right. Unless you have $10 million, and then you can force it down people's throats. It's the slow road, and that's a whole different process, and it's a much longer process to find out if you have something. Because I really don't even know if I have something yet. When we're on shelves, people love us, people know us. People ask for our product.
People buy your product.
People buy our product. But until we're out of Rhode Island, maybe through New England, and see how people embrace us, then we'll know if we have a product.
Right.
But to get that far out is going to take a couple more years. Because financially, we can't just say, let's be everywhere.
Right. And the minute you involve others, you lose the creative control. And that, of course, is the most delicate question of all. At what point in time do you say goodbye to your product in order to give it a larger life?
Give it life. Right, right. Yeah, and that's something we've been talking about recently. What are we willing to do? First, finding somebody that would have an interest in something like this.
Right.
It's not. This isn't tech. This isn't a billion-dollar company. This is a small niche market that could be a great little business. But that's what it's always going to be. It's never going to be, a billion-dollar business. So.
But it could be line extension for an existing high-end manufacturer of food products who, or it could also be, in the case of private labeling, a Dina DeLuca comes along, a Whole Paycheck comes along who wants to private label it. There's opportunities there, but, again, anyone who's ever dealt with Walmart or any of these big players, there is an element of selling your soul to the devil.
Definitely. And it just becomes what point are you at, I find, because we're trying to make a living too, right? We're trying to pay our bill. So at what point does that button get pushed?
And there's a special torment on being successful.
Yes, there is.
Sometimes it's easier. Okay, it didn't work, but we had fun. Yeah, but ruh-roh. Honey, they want more.
I'd like that problem. I'd like to try that problem.
Yeah, and I guess distribution is the key.
It's sales. It's people, feet on the ground.
Right.
If nobody knows about you,
would you mind sharing who you're with? If someone listens and they have a food store or a beer store, what distributor would they call you directly?
So they can call me directly. Reach out at bootblack.com, bootblackbrand.com. My Rhode Island distributor is Craft Beer Guild Rhode Island.
Okay.
They're a liquor distributor. Outside of Rhode Island, I'm with Associated Buyers, and I'm just starting to get on boarded with UNFI Next, which is UNFI's small business kind of incubation, where they take you in at DC, so distribution points at a time.
Right.
And help you grow the business.
As opposed to hitting you with that one big order that you can't.
That you can't.
Right, and that blows you out of the water.
Yeah, you just can't.
Well, that's the other danger, the quote-unquote overnight success, where you get that $1 million order.
Right.
And your manufacturing, your control system, none of it's in place yet to take it to that next level. Right. There are stages in a business creation, and different managers are good at, you've got the wild-eyed entrepreneur who can bring it to where's the shipping product, then you've got that next person who can bring it to distribution, and then you've got that other person who can bring it, quote-unquote, national, or poise it for sale. And that's, there are different skill sets, there are different careers, different contact lists.
And that's what I'm wearing. And that's why we've been talking about what do we do next.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know what I like to do and I know what I'm good at.
Right.
And there are definitely many things in this business I'm not good at.
When you get to our age, self-awareness is one of the secret gifts of being of age, isn't it?
Yeah, it is amazing. And,
Right.
and now what do you do about it?
Right.
You know, or can you find a solution?
Right.
So that's where we are now. We're at that tipping point of we're either going to keep going or we're just going to drop off.
But the moral of the story, if you will, I mean, there's a couple here. Number one, perseverance, individual talent, someone who has a goal, and someone who's got that creative spirit can look to, and I'm one of those people who can at times be very pessimistic about what goes on in Rhode Island. But what I love about your story, and there are a few others, is that there is a talent set in Rhode Island that is unique. The market in Rhode Island is so accessible, so controlled. They're, doing this as a startup in something as close as Connecticut would be a completely different dynamic.
I wouldn't have a business if I was anywhere else, I don't think.
Right.
I think it's because of Rhode Island, not only physically,
Right.
it's small, I can do it myself in Rhode Island, but the people and the compassion of people and the passion people have for unique
Right.
products in Rhode Island. The bad thing is, it's Rhode Island, it's very small. So in order to be successful, I need to grow out of Rhode Island.
Right. But, I guess the metaphor is, as is Hope in Maine to restaurant, or to food businesses, Rhode Island, one of the positive aspects is the unique culture, the tribal-like culture of Rhode Island can be as fundamental to the success of a business like yours, as sometimes we get so frustrated by the challenges. And I think that's as we enter the holiday season, I think we have to, particularly after the events of the last few months here in Rhode Island, we have to embrace the positive. And, I call it that warrior spirit. Embrace that, and understand that our ability as Rhode Islanders to adapt, overcome, and improvise is probably better than anyone's alive because of the madness that we're surrounded by.
Yeah. As I say, I woke up this morning, I was breathing. It's probably a good day.
We're breathing, and we're having a cocktail, and we're on the air.
Right.
It really isn't. It really isn't. I mean, it'd be hard. I look at GoLocal Prov and what they've been able to accomplish in the years that they've been in business in terms of Josh and Kate and their vision for bringing a different media perspective when you're surrounded by very nice people, but ultimately corporatized media. When you look at organizations like this on the large end, and then on the smaller scale, the Coalition, Rhode Island Free Radio, of course, people at Motif run a great newspaper. We've got this. Not only do we have this flourishing restaurant and foodie scene, but we got this flourishing independent media, independent bands, independent. It's a hell of a time to be alive, and it's a hell of a time to be in Rhode Island.
And they're so supportive. Also, the media, they'll do anything to help you.
Yeah.
What can we do? Let's write a story. Let's talk about you.
Yeah.
And that's what I always tell people. The best thing you can do for any small business is to tell a friend about the product that you love, or if you're in a bar or a restaurant next time, and ask them if they have Boot Black. And when they go, "What's Boot Black?" Tell them. If you're passionate about our product, tell somebody about it. That's the best thing you can do for a small business.
Right. And then, particularly at certain times of the year, spend a little extra, go a little deeper, and understand that the product you're buying will really continue this sort of unique life we have here in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
That's wonderful stuff. Here's to you. So it's Boot Black brand. It's complex cocktail and soda syrups. Whew, this is potent stuff. Yikes. Good thing we're standing up. The 4 flavors again we've got?
Original is our ginger cardamom lime, cranberry jalapeno lime, traditional old fashioned, and classic tonic.
Excellent. And the website?
bootblackbrand.com.
And on Facebook?
bootblackbrand. And on Instagram, bootblack_brand.
There you go.
Follow us, we appreciate it.
Some of the restaurants you mentioned tonight, the Eddie, Dirk's, Rogues Island, other places you might.
Oh my God!
I mean, I
draw these blanks when people ask me all the time. All the stores and the restaurants and the bars that have helped us, the distilleries, Sons of Liberty,
right,
fantastic partners. Again, how can we help? How can we make it easier for you?
Right, the people at the Guild.
Yeah, the Guild. You know, the coffee shops. New Harvest uses our tonic. Borealis down in East Providence uses our old fashioned. So for coffees and teas, yeah, it's an amazing downtown here is amazing with people wanting to offer you things.
And where is the next tiki bar? Because
Next tiki bar, so that's Catherine Hood. She's awesome. It's called 8C's Tiki. You can look it up on Instagram. It'll be at Cortland Club. I believe it's the week of Thanksgiving. I want to say the 21st. For some reason, it's my mind. Great cocktails, lots of fun. Everybody from the industry shows up. Everybody from Rhode Island shows up. It's just it's a great party and a great time and great cocktails.
now, and the Cortland Club, that's kind of a unique animal. I'm not sure if a lot of people really know about the Cortland Club. I'm not sure if the people in the Cortland Club want a lot of people to know about the Cortland Club, but it is a private dining and supper club, if you will, bar on the heart of the West End. I haven't been in. I've driven by. It's a beautiful building, and it points to the Renaissance, if you will, of the West End.
Yeah, it's again, I actually haven't been there yet myself because I can only go to so many bars.
Yeah, I was going to say, this could be for me, as someone who has issues with limitations, this could be dangerous. This could absolutely be dangerous.
Yeah, and there's so many good. The girl that's over there, Elle, comes from the Eddy. She just started up as general manager, I believe, over there. Really knowledgeable, great personality, do anything to help out, always wants to support people, and knows how to make a damn good cocktail.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Again, the Boot Black brand, the complex cocktails and soda syrups. I can tell you right now, quality. Listen, as I like to say, whether it be this or my good friend and supporter, John Zambato at Yacht Club Soda, you're coming up to the holiday season. You're going to spend an enormous amount of time, quite frankly, money, energy on putting out a meal that's going to, well, there's a little competitive spirit here in Rhode Island, too, when it comes to putting it down for the holidays. And whether it be a Patriots game tailgate party, whether it be your Thanksgiving dinner, your Christmas dinner, whatever, any of the number of other religious celebrations that take place, whether it be Kwanzaa or Hanukkah, take that one extra step. Don't settle for the refinery soda. Very often it's not a big jump to get to that next level. And if you're going to put together the kind of meal that I know Rhode Islanders are capable of, this is really the perfect addition to it. It takes it to another level. It fosters a conversation about what cocktails mean in our lives, and very often how far you can take them in a given night. If you want to have just really a party that kind of takes it to the next level, I think you have to incorporate this.
Thank you. And this is what it's about, right? It's about being social. That's what cocktails are about.
There was a time in I spent a fair amount of time in New York City. There used to be a bar where men and women went to drink. And the conversation was as important as the drinking. And it was civil, it was intense, it was a contact sport, yet at the same time, rigidly polite. And there's, yes, where the art of using a word was far better than using the art of an insult. A well-placed word could have lifelong ramifications as opposed to the cheap, easy out of an insult. And that's something I think we need to get back to in this country.
I agree.
Excellent.
I agree. Thanks again.
Thank you. Folks, we're going to take an early out this evening. I think the usual folks who are willing to come onto this show and spend time with us, I think this election season people have kind of had it for a while. We're going to take a couple of days off now. We'll be back next Friday. We're going to bring in some folks from the Goldwater Institute. We're looking to have folks in the next few weeks from FIRE. In terms of, we're going to talk about free speech issues, and we're going to double down on this next upcoming legislative session, because we are going to, as we always do, make sure that legislators are people not wanting to get a life, but actually looking to advance and help other people's lives. That's what we do here at the Coalition. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. It's actually not that bad out. They were predicting all types of catastrophe, cats and dogs, dogs and cats, and yet it's just kind of a fall evening out there. So what better time to go out and sample a Boot Black brand syrup with Sons of Liberty beverage at any one of the number of restaurants we mentioned tonight. Life is just short. Enjoy it. And as always, take it personally. We'll see you next week.